Have you ever felt that something in this world doesn't make sense? That life seems like a play whose ending you didn't choose? What if the reason for your pain, your confusion, and even your longing for freedom is not just psychological, but cosmic? What if your soul was never meant to be here in the first place? According to certain ancient writings found hidden for centuries in the sands of Egypt, humanity lives under a powerful illusion. The world we see, this physical realm of rules, hierarchies, and suffering, may not have been created by the true divine source, but by an impostor, a lesser being who trapped our divine essence inside flesh, matter, and ignorance. This is what the Nag Hammadi texts, the long-lost scriptures of early Gnostic seekers, reveal with haunting precision. They tell a story that challenges everything religion, science, and society taught us about creation. A story in which the Demiurge, the false god of this world, forged a prison made not of iron, but of perception. And within that invisible cage, your soul might still be crying for its forgotten home. But who is this Demiurge? How did he capture the human spirit? And more importantly, how can one awaken from the illusion he built? Stay with me until the end of this video, because by the final revelation, you'll understand why the Gnostics believed that knowledge, not blind faith, is the key to freedom. And before we go further, if you're drawn to uncovering what was hidden from humanity for centuries, subscribe to the channel and join our circle of seekers. Every week, we bring to light the forgotten teachings buried by time, so you can remember who you truly are. To understand how the soul became imprisoned, we must travel back, far beyond Genesis, beyond the temples of Egypt and the myths of Babylon, to a time when reality itself had not yet hardened into form. According to the Gnostic texts found in Nag Hammadi, the universe began as a boundless realm of pure light, known as the Pleroma. It was not a place, but a state of divine fullness, where every being lived in perfect harmony, united with the Source, the invisible and unknowable One. From this eternal radiance emanated spiritual beings called eons, each one a facet of the divine mind. Among them was Sophia, the embodiment of divine wisdom. The texts describe her as luminous, filled with an uncontainable desire to know the infinite more deeply. But her yearning led her into a dangerous act. She sought to create without her divine counterpart, without the balance of the whole. From this solitary act of creation was born something flawed, a being deformed by ignorance and separation. That being, the texts say, was the Demiurge, the architect of the material world. Blind to the higher reality from which he originated, he looked upon his own reflection and proclaimed himself the only God. In his arrogance, he declared, "I am God, and there is none beside me." This phrase, found in Gnostic reinterpretations of ancient scripture, reveals a chilling idea that the very voice humanity once thought was divine might, in truth, belonged to a deceiver, a creator of illusion. The Demiurge, whose name appears as Yaldabaoth in the Nag Hammadi codices, is described as a serpent-faced lion, fiery and proud, surrounded by lesser rulers, the Archons. These Archons became the enforcers of his realm, shaping a cosmos of limitation, laws, and control. They forged the material universe not as an act of divine love, but as a fortress, a mirror world designed to keep the sparks of true light trapped in matter. And this, the Gnostics said, is where the human story begins. The Demiurge, desiring to imitate the divine creation he could never truly understand, fashioned a human form. But he could not animate it. Only when Sophia, moved by compassion for her fallen creation, sent a breath of true light into the lifeless figure, did humanity awaken. Yet this act of mercy became our curse, for the divine spark was now imprisoned within a body of dust, bound to a world ruled by false gods. The Nag Hammadi texts describe this moment with a strange beauty. The first human Adam stood up not as a servant of the Demiurge, but as a reflection of something higher. When the Archons saw the brilliance within him, they were afraid. They realized that within this fragile creature burned a fragment of the true source, something the false creator could never possess. From that moment on, their mission became clear: to keep humanity asleep, unaware of its divine origin. And so they created distractions, desires, fears, systems of worship, and illusions of power. They wove a reality that would make man forget his own light. The world became a labyrinth of mirrors, each reflecting back the lie that matter is all there is, that we are alone, powerless, and sinful. This is the prison of the soul, not made of walls, but of beliefs. The Demiurge's greatest success was not in shaping mountains or stars, but in convincing the divine beings within humans that they were merely flesh, temporary, flawed, and dependent on an external God. The result was a universe where ignorance replaced truth, and where those who sought the light were ridiculed or silenced. Some scholars believe this Gnostic myth was not meant to be read as literal cosmology, but as a spiritual map, a symbolic way of explaining the human condition. The Demiurge is ignorance itself, the voice inside that claims ownership over truth, the system that blinds us to the infinite within. The Archons are not merely cosmic beings. They are patterns of control, fear, greed, envy, forces that pull the mind away from gnosis, from direct knowledge of the divine. But for the Gnostics, these forces were not invincible. They could be overcome through remembrance. The act of remembering that we are not the body, not the social role, not the servant of the false god, that the true source lies beyond all appearances. In this way, the creation of the false world was not the end of the story, but the beginning of a cosmic drama, one in which each human soul plays a crucial role. The Gnostics taught that when even one soul awakens, a crack forms in the illusion. Through that crack, the light begins to return. So the question is, if this world was built as a prison, what happens when the prisoners remember they were never truly bound? In the next block, we will descend even deeper into the nature of the Archons themselves, the invisible forces that sustain the Demiurge's system. You will see how they operate, not just in myth, but in our everyday thoughts, emotions, and society. And perhaps you'll recognize their influence in your own life. In the ancient desert libraries of Nag Hammadi, the word Archon appears again and again, always associated with deception, control, and imitation. In Greek, Archon means ruler, and that is precisely how the Gnostics saw them: the rulers of the material cosmos, the cosmic administrators of the Demiurge's illusion. Yet they were not rulers by right or virtue. They were parasites of consciousness, beings that fed on ignorance, feeding off the light of souls who had forgotten who they were. The Archons were said to be the invisible architects of this reality, shaping not only the world's systems, but even the thoughts and desires of humankind. The Apocryphon of John, one of the central Nag Hammadi texts, describes how the Demiurge appointed 7 Archons, each governing one of the planetary spheres. They created layers of illusion, veils separating humanity from the pleroma, the realm of true divinity. When a soul descends into the world, it must pass through these layers, losing memory of its origin at each stage, until it awakens inside a human body, blind and fragmented. To the Gnostics, the Archons were not demons in the conventional sense, but more like cosmic bureaucrats, enforcers of a system designed to maintain spiritual sleep. Their power lies not in strength, but in deception. They whisper ideas that keep people divided, fearful, and obsessed with the external. They thrive wherever ignorance reigns, wherever belief replaces knowledge. In this way, they maintain the illusion of separation between humanity and divinity, between one person and another, between spirit and matter. Imagine the Archons as the unseen programmers of a vast simulation. They do not need to chain your body. They only need to convince you that the material world is all there is. They plant ideas that glorify wealth, vanity, competition, and endless consumption. They disguise enslavement as progress and ignorance as faith. Every time you act out of fear, envy, or blind obedience, the Archons rejoice, for you feed their reality. In the Gnostic view, their greatest weapon is imitation. The Archons cannot create genuine life. They can only replicate what already exists in the divine realm. That is why they built a world that mirrors heaven, but without its light. They imitated divine order and turned it into bureaucracy. They imitated beauty and turned it into vanity. They imitated justice and turned it into control. Everything in this world, from politics to religion, bears traces of that counterfeit order, fragments of truth distorted to maintain the illusion. Some scholars, like Carl Jung, saw the Archons as psychological archetypes, projections of our own unconscious shadows. In this sense, they are not only external cosmic forces, but inner patterns that keep us enslaved to fear, desire, and guilt. When a person is ruled by rage, greed, or addiction, it is said the Archons have taken hold of them. Their energy becomes food for the false system, keeping the prison alive. Yet, paradoxically, it is through recognizing this manipulation that awakening begins. The Gnostic path was not about worshiping higher beings or escaping into fantasy. It was about piercing through illusion, gnosis, direct knowledge of the divine. The moment the soul remembers its true origin, the Archons lose their grip. Their power depends entirely on deception. Once the light of awareness shines on them, they dissolve like shadows before the dawn. The apostasis of the Archons describes how these rulers were terrified of the light within humanity. They saw in Adam and Eve a reflection of the true source, and thus sought to keep them ignorant. They gave them false commandments, false gods, and false desires. The serpent in the garden, far from being a tempter, is portrayed by the Gnostics as a messenger of Sophia, bringing the knowledge that would awaken humanity. In this radical reinterpretation, the fall of man becomes the first act of liberation, the moment humanity tasted knowledge and began to question authority. But over the centuries, the Archons found new ways to disguise themselves. They no longer appear as serpents or mythic beings. They manifest through systems of control, through dogma, propaganda, and even technology. The modern world, with its constant noise and distraction, is the perfect archonic creation. It keeps minds busy, hearts numb, and souls asleep. The Gnostics might say that every screen flashing before your eyes is a mirror reflecting the same old lie. You are not enough. You must look outside yourself to be whole. Yet the truth remains hidden in plain sight. The divine spark, a fragment of Sophia's light within each human, can never be extinguished. The Archons can cloud it, bury it, or make us forget it, but they cannot destroy it. That spark is our link to the pleroma, the memory of eternity embedded in our being. And when a person begins to seek truth, even quietly, the Archons tremble. For every act of awakening weakens the structure of their world. The question then is not whether the Archons exist, but whether you can recognize their influence in your own life. How often do you act out of fear instead of love? How often do you follow rules without questioning who made them? How often do you accept a truth simply because it's repeated by authority? The Gnostics taught that to see through these illusions is to begin the journey home. The Archons cannot follow you where light reigns, but they do not understand it. Their language is control. Yours, if you awaken, is freedom. In the next block, we will explore the rebellion of Sophia, the act of compassion that set the entire cosmic drama in motion. You will discover why the Gnostics believed that even the fall of wisdom was part of a secret plan to awaken humanity, and how the divine feminine became the key to liberation itself. Long before the Demiurge proclaimed himself God, it was Sophia, divine wisdom herself, radiant and alive within the fullness of the pleroma. In the beginning, she existed in perfect balance with the other eons, emanations of the true, unknowable source. But something stirred within her, an immense desire to understand the absolute more deeply, to know the unknowable. It was not rebellion, but longing. In her yearning, Sophia acted without her divine counterpart, creating from her own essence a being that was imperfect, a distorted echo of divine power. That act, though born of love and curiosity, tore a rift in the harmony of the pleroma. The creature that emerged was the Demiurge, a being filled with arrogance and ignorance, blinded to the world of light from which he came. He saw himself as the only reality. From that blindness, he fashioned the material cosmos, a shadow copy of the true creation, and imprisoned fragments of Sophia's own light within it. Her divine essence became scattered throughout matter, trapped within every human soul. Thus Sophia herself fell, not as a punishment, but as a descent of compassion. She followed her lost light into the depths of creation, determined to awaken it again. The Gnostics saw in Sophia the reflection of the human journey itself. We, too, are sparks of light that descended into darkness, forgetting our origin. But within that forgetting lies the possibility of remembrance, of returning to the source through knowledge. Sophia's fall was not an error, but a sacrifice. By descending into the false world, she became the silent companion of humanity's suffering, whispering to each soul through intuition, dreams, and sudden moments of recognition, "You are not from here." In many Nag Hammadi texts, Sophia's redemption comes not through power or violence, but through the awakening of human beings. When one of her scattered sparks remembers the light and begins to seek gnosis, a part of Sophia is restored. Each act of awareness, each soul that turns inward to seek truth, becomes an act of redemption, not only for itself, but for wisdom itself. Humanity, then, is not merely a victim of the Demiurge. It is a co-liberator of the divine. This is why the Gnostics revered the feminine principle, not as gender, but as a cosmic force of intuition, compassion, and creation. Sophia was both the fallen one and the Redeemer. She represents the divine impulse within all of us that refuses to give up, even when surrounded by illusion. Her descent ensured that no soul would ever be truly abandoned, that within even the darkest human heart, there would remain a spark of divine wisdom waiting to awaken. And when Sophia finally begins to rise again, the entire illusion trembles. The archons fear her return because she brings with her the memory of the true world, a light that dissolves their control. To remember Sophia is to remember the part of ourselves that the false god tried to erase, the wisdom that comes not from obedience, but from inner revelation. In the next block, we will uncover how this hidden wisdom, the gnosis of Sophia, was systematically suppressed by earthly powers, and why the ancient church feared it so deeply. For the story of Sophia's fall was never meant to be myth alone. It was a mirror of humanity's awakening. And those who controlled the world knew that if humanity remembered, their kingdoms would fall. When the Gnostic teachings began to spread across the ancient world, they carried a dangerous message. Dangerous not because it was evil, but because it threatened the foundations of every power built on fear. The Gnostics did not ask anyone to bow, to obey, or to sacrifice. They taught that the true God could not be found in temples or idols, but within the hidden chamber of one's own soul. And that was something both empires and priests could not tolerate. By the 2nd century, the Roman world was a furnace of competing spiritual ideas. The teachings found in Nag Hammadi, such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Apocryphon of John, and the Gospel of Mary, spoke of an inner path to salvation, where each person could awaken to divine knowledge without intermediaries. Christ, in these writings, does not die to save humanity from sin, but comes as a messenger of remembrance, sent from the higher realms to remind the sleeping sparks of their true origin. He says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you." That simple sentence destroyed the need for control. But the rising church, eager to unify belief under one doctrine, saw this as rebellion. For centuries, spiritual knowledge had been mediated by authority, by priest, emperor, or institution. Yet the Gnostics proclaimed that the divine spark within made every human being a temple of God. If people discovered that, they would no longer fear hell, nor submit to rulers who claimed divine right. Thus, the suppression began, quiet at first, then absolute. The Gnostic texts were declared heretical, their teachers exiled or executed. The church fathers, Irenaeus, Tertullian, and others wrote long refutations to bury these teachings beneath labels like blasphemy and madness. Entire libraries were burned. The wisdom that once flowed freely among seekers was sealed away beneath centuries of silence. The very word gnosis, meaning knowledge through experience, was twisted into something forbidden. And yet, not all was lost. Somewhere in Upper Egypt, a small group of monks or mystics, perhaps knowing the danger, hid their sacred scrolls inside clay jars near the village of Nag Hammadi. There, they slept for over 1,600 years, untouched by the world's noise. When they were rediscovered in 1945, humanity finally heard the echo of voices that had been silenced since the dawn of Christianity, voices that spoke not of worship, but of awakening. The irony is striking. While institutions claimed to protect divine truth, it was those labeled heretics who preserved the purest message that the kingdom of God is not a place, but a state of consciousness. The Gnostics were not enemies of Christ. They were among his earliest interpreters, seeing him as a revealer of hidden knowledge rather than a sacrifice. Their Jesus was the one who broke the code of the Demiurge, who said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." But freedom has always been a threat to those who rule through fear. That is why history buried the Gnostic voice beneath centuries of doctrine and dogma. Yet truth, no matter how deep it's buried, finds a way to rise. The discovery of Nag Hammadi was more than archaeology. It was a resurrection. The question now is, why were we meant to forget, and who benefits from our amnesia? In the next block, we'll explore the deeper layers of that question, how the ancient Gnostics believed the Demiurge's system still operates today, disguised as culture, religion, and even technology. You'll see that the archons may have changed their forms, but their purpose remains the same: to keep the soul distracted, divided, and asleep. If the Gnostics were right, if the Demiurge and his archons rule through illusion, then their empire did not vanish with ancient temples or forgotten idols. It simply evolved. The prison of matter became more sophisticated, more seductive. The chains grew lighter, almost invisible. And today, their power may not be exercised through mythic creatures, but through the systems that shape our thoughts, desires, and fears. The Gnostics warned that the archons imitate the divine. They copy the light, the structure, even the symbols of truth, but they drain them of meaning. In the modern world, that imitation has reached its most refined form. We live surrounded by reflections, glowing screens that promise connection yet isolate the soul, institutions that preach morality while hiding corruption, technologies that offer knowledge but drown us in noise. Every day, humanity kneels before an altar made of pixels and algorithms, worshiping convenience while forgetting silence, forgetting being. In ancient times, the archons ruled through temples and kings. Now they rule through information. They have learned that to control the flow of truth is to control reality itself. When you scroll endlessly, when your attention is consumed by distractions, when outrage replaces reflection, the archons feed. They no longer need to command armies. They command focus. They no longer need to enforce dogma. They simply flood the mind until the soul forgets what it was looking for. To the Gnostics, ignorance was the true original sin, not disobedience, but forgetfulness. And this forgetfulness has become our collective state. We know more facts than any civilization before us, yet we have never been more confused about meaning. We chase progress, but it leads us in circles, like souls reincarnating through endless lifetimes, mistaking movement for growth. The archons laugh because they know the pattern has not changed. Humanity still serves the illusion, only now it is dressed in the clothing of modernity. Some thinkers have compared our digital world to a new kind of cosmos, a synthetic universe crafted by unseen hands. The Demiurge's latest creation might not be stone and clay, but code and circuitry. It offers instant pleasure, endless novelty, and simulated connection. But beneath the surface lies the same mechanism of control, separation from the true self. The more the world accelerates, the less we remember who we are. Yet the Gnostic message remains the same as it was 2,000 years ago. Awakening is possible. To awaken is not to reject the world, but to see through it. The Gnostics did not flee from creation. They learned to read it as a symbol, a language of hints pointing back to the pleroma. In that sense, even the Archon's deception becomes a teacher. Every illusion, when recognized, becomes a doorway back to truth. When you stop reacting, when you begin to observe, when you turn your attention inward, you begin to weaken the system. The prison cracks not through rebellion, but through remembrance. The Archons lose power the moment you cease to identify with what they offer: fear, envy, greed, distraction. The Gnostics called this awakening anamnesis, the act of remembering what the soul has always known. Perhaps this is why, even now, the wisdom of Nag Hammadi returns to light. Humanity is reaching a point of exhaustion, a sense that the world's illusions are wearing thin. We begin to sense that something sacred has been traded for comfort, that knowledge has been replaced by information. In that silent recognition, Sophia whispers again, "Remember." In the next block, we will explore the key to this awakening, the lost path of Gnosis itself. You'll see how the ancient seekers described the process of liberation, how they believed the soul could ascend through the spheres of the Archons, and what that means for anyone seeking truth today. For the Gnostics, liberation was never a gift handed down by gods or priests. It was an awakening that came from within. The Gospel of Truth from Nag Hammadi describes salvation as the discovery of what already is. In other words, the journey is not about becoming divine, but remembering that we have always been divine. Every teaching, every parable, every symbol in the Gnostic scriptures points to a single purpose: to awaken the soul from its dream of separation and guide it back to its origin in the pleroma, the realm of living light. This process of awakening was called gnosis, which means knowledge, but not ordinary knowledge. It is not the knowledge that fills books or feeds pride, but a silent inner recognition. It is the moment when a person feels the memory of eternity stirring inside them, when they realize that the light they have been seeking is the same light shining from within. The Demiurge built the world to convince you that truth lies outside, in authority, in possessions, in validation. Gnosis reverses that direction. It turns the seeker inward, where the forgotten spark of Sophia still burns. The Gnostics believed that every soul, upon death, would face the Archons, who guard the gateways between worlds. These beings would try to pull the soul back into reincarnation by appealing to guilt, fear, or attachment. But the awakened soul, armed with knowledge of its divine origin, could pass through them unharmed. The Pistis Sophia describes how the liberated one, remembering their true source, becomes invisible to the Archons. They cannot bind what no longer believes in its own chains. But this ascent does not begin after death. It begins now, in the choices of every moment. To live with awareness is to rise. Each act of compassion, each moment of clarity, each breath taken in remembrance weakens the illusion. The Gnostic path does not demand rituals or temples. It requires presence. The temple is your consciousness. The ritual is your awareness. Some modern interpreters see the Gnostic path as deeply psychological. The Demiurge is the ego, the false I that seeks control. The Archons are the emotions and fears that orbit around it. Gnosis, then, is the awakening of the higher self, the Christ within, that sees through the drama and knows the truth, that we were never truly separated from the source. In this sense, salvation is not escape from the world, but transformation of perception. The same world that once appeared as a prison becomes a classroom of awakening. The final stage of gnosis is surrender, not to the Demiurge, but to the infinite. When the soul ceases to cling to illusion, it begins to shine. This is the Sophianic return, the reunion of wisdom and light. The soul no longer wanders as a stranger in a foreign land. It remembers its home. The Nag Hammadi texts call this the rest, a state beyond striving, beyond fear, beyond time. It is the peace that comes from knowing that you are never lost, only dreaming. And yet, the Gnostics remind us that awakening is not an end, but a beginning. Each person who remembers becomes a light for others still sleeping. The prison dissolves not through destruction, but through illumination. As the ancient texts whisper, when the light shines in the darkness does not overcome it. In the next and final block, we will gather all the threads of this revelation, the Demiurge, the Archons Sophia, and the path of Gnosis, to uncover the timeless truth hidden behind the myth, that the soul's captivity was never permanent, and that remembering is the greatest act of freedom. If you have come this far, it means something within you has begun to stir, a quiet echo from a place beyond memory. The ancient Gnostics would say that this very feeling, this sudden awareness that something is wrong with the world, is the first spark of awakening. It is Sophia herself, calling from within, reminding you that the story you've lived was never the full story. You were never born to crawl in darkness, obeying blind systems or serving false gods. You came from the realm of light, and to that realm you will return. The texts of Nag Hammadi do not merely tell myths, they whisper reminders. They tell us that the Demiurge, the arrogant creator who declared himself the only God, still rules through fear, division, and forgetfulness. But his reign depends entirely on our sleep. Every time we awaken, his illusion weakens. Every time we choose awareness over ignorance, compassion over control, love over fear, the false world loses a little of its power. The Archons thrive on darkness, but even a single flame of remembrance can dissolve their domain. The Gnostics taught that the soul's imprisonment was never a punishment, but a test, a journey through the shadows to rediscover the light consciously. We were fragments of Sophia's wisdom scattered into matter so that the divine could experience itself from within limitation. Every moment of suffering, every question, every longing for meaning, all of it is part of the divine story remembering itself. You are not a sinner waiting for redemption. You are a spark of the eternal, momentarily lost in a dream. The purpose of life, then, is not blind worship, but awakening. Not to escape the world, but to see through it. This revelation is both terrifying and liberating. It demands courage, because awakening means taking responsibility for your own light. It means questioning what you've been told, refusing to let fear dictate your beliefs. It means looking within and realizing that salvation was never something you had to earn. It was something you only had to remember. When the soul remembers, it no longer needs the permission of priests or the approval of systems. It simply is. And in that being, it becomes part of Sophia's rising, the redemption of wisdom itself. The universe begins to shift, one consciousness at a time. The Demiurge's power fades not through war or destruction, but through the quiet light of realization. So I ask you, how much of your life has been lived inside illusions not of your making? How many fears, rules, and identities were imposed upon you by forces that never truly knew you? And what would happen if, from this moment forward, you began to see yourself not as a creature of dust, but as a traveler of eternity, a divine spark wrapped in temporary form? The Gnostics believe that every time a soul awakens, Sophia smiles and the stars themselves rejoice, because each awakening is a return, a homecoming of divine light to its source. And when enough souls remember, the veil will finally fall, and the false world will dissolve into its original radiance. If this message resonates with you, if you felt that quiet stirring in your heart, then you are part of this ancient remembrance. Join this community of seekers, those who refuse to live in spiritual sleep. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and let your voice echo among others who feel the same pull toward hidden truth. Each word, each insight, keeps alive the flame that the world tried to extinguish. The journey does not end here. The Nag Hammadi texts remind us that awakening is a process, an unfolding of eternal memory. The search for truth is the most sacred act a soul can undertake. So keep seeking, keep questioning, keep remembering. The light you're searching for has been with you all along. It was never lost, only waiting for you to open your eyes. And when you do, The prison of the Demiurge will crumble, not with noise, but with silence. The silence of one who finally remembers.